So, for the last few weeks in one of my shrimp tanks, I have been having a really big pest snail problem, particularly bladder snails, pond snails. Luckily, no Malaysian trumpet snails. Those things could survive a nuclear holocaust. But getting rid of bladder snails is still a task. They're a little easier to kill, but man, it's ridiculous. And you can't really use the same measures as you would with other situations. This is a shrimp breeding tank, so it's debatable as to whether or not assassin snails, Helena, something like that, eat shrimp babies. I don't know. Some people say they have seen it. Some people say it's never affected them. And then there's puffer fish. I used to have a puffer fish that I had specifically for that task, but unfortunately she passed away a few months ago. Little Poof was a good puffer. That being said, so in order to fix the problem, I have to go to some extremes, and I'm still testing things out because I don't have access to certain things like Gastropex, which is it's a medication you can put in the tank that gets rid of gastropods or snails and what have you. I've never tested it. I've never talked to anyone who's ever used it. I would love to get my hands on some of it and really try it out. Supposedly, it will kill snails, but it will not kill shrimp. Don't know if I believe that because inverts are generally pretty susceptible to the same things no matter what it is. So you might be wondering what it is I'm trying to do. Well, I did a few different things. So, excuse the mess. Things are a little hectic right now. I'm doing like a bajillion things at one at the moment. This is the 10-gallon tank. Now here's the dealio. I got this water in here up to 125 degrees Fahrenheit for maybe an hour or so. And that kills off a certain amount of snails, and then I slowly change the temperature around. Now you got to be careful when raising the temperature that high and then lowering it back down because you could shock the glass, and this being tempered glass, when you shock it, it all shatters. So you got to be careful with temperature differences. Now what I'm doing now, instead of hot water, I'm switching to cold water. I'm trying to shock their systems. So hopefully the switch from really hot to suddenly super cold is enough to kill them. Now, the adult snails, I think it should be effective against, but it's the egg sacs that are the problem. You see, the egg sacs are pretty darn resilient in their form. Eradicating these kinds of snails completely isn't really done without the use of something like copper. But copper, when you add something with copper like fertilizer to this kind of a tank, it stays in there for a very long time, months and months at a time. You can fill it up and drain it out as many times as you want. Copper is a really hard thing to get rid of, and copper will kill pretty much any invertebrate, including the shrimp I'm trying to breed. So I'm trying more natural routes with extreme heats and extreme colds, fluctuating back and forth, shocking systems, and that way, and that sort of thing. Now I got all the shrimp out of here in a breeder net in one of my other tanks. So you might be wondering why I had such a bad outbreak in here. Well, here's the thing. It wasn't bad until I stopped actively trying to get rid of them. Whenever I saw a bladder snail, I would squish them, and that would be the end of it, especially the adults so they wouldn't lay eggs. But then I had a problem. Dead snails all up inside this tank started creating a ton of ammonia, and it started killing my shrimp, particularly my brand new Bloody Mary shrimps, which is not cool. So I decided, you know what, just redo the tank completely. Start from scratch, which means, yeah, I gotta cycle this thing all over again, because I don't know if there's any egg sacs on the media, which in this case would be the sponges. So I gotta do this thing all over again from scratch. It's gonna take like a month to get this thing back up and ready again. Especially because you really need a well-established biofiltration system for shrimp. A little bit at a time, but I'm trying little things here and there. I'm actually thinking about starting a new subreddit on Reddit, specifically for getting rid of aquarium pests. Maybe I'll call it Aquarium Pest Control, where we'll talk about getting rid of anything like certain types of worms and certain types of pest snails, etc. Maybe the specific niche community who's trying to figure it out just like I am and work together on this, because two minds are better than one at sometimes. And I've been monitoring the temperature and such with my little Weber thermometer. So right now we're down at 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Obviously we're not going to get down directly to 0 degrees Celsius because that would be freezing, and that means the water would have to actually freeze. We're not putting this in a freezer. Now what I did think about doing is, since it is winter outside, I thought about, hey, what if I put the tank outside for a few hours in the sub-freezing temperature and then just let it do that? Which I might do that. I might have to resort to that. But right now I'm just using a really cold ice bath. And I'm keeping an eye on the egg sacs. Because they're everywhere, man. Bladder snails and pond snails, Malaysian trumpet snails, ram's horns, they reproduce excessively. And, okay, if you're purposely trying to breed them because you have a puffer fish, or if you have any sort of fish that actively eats them as food, cool. This is not that situation. This is a situation where the snails are overpopulating, eating up all the biofilm, all the algae, and all the food that I give that are supposed to be for the shrimps, and then the shrimps are getting hungry and dying from that. So, you can only, in this situation, there's only one invertebrate I want in this tank, and that is the shrimps. Everything else is a no-go. Can't have it. So that's the difficulty of a shrimp tank, and when you're trying to breed them, it's particularly difficult when you run into pests. Now another problem is I am going to be ordering a ton of, not hornwort, but frog bit, because I want some floater plants to really suck up the nitrates on this thing. That'll help a little bit with keeping the water quality better. Fewer water changes, hopefully. But with anything, plant related, there's a risk that you'll get a pest snail. So, you can do salt baths and stuff like that, but salt isn't always effective. Man, I've had bladder snails live inside of toilets. Like, okay, I know this sounds weird. If you've never seen my videos before, you won't understand. Let me explain that. My fish room is in the basement. The previous owner had the basement unfinished. One of the rooms was supposed to be a restroom. It never got past putting a toilet in. So I use that toilet for drainage purposes, and the rest of the room is just blank. So I put my tanks and stuff in there. It's actually kind of convenient. So in that toilet, there was a colony of bladder snails living on nothing but the wastewater I was putting in the toilet for months at a time. It's crazy. So, and then people say, oh, well, stop overfeeding. And I'm like, dude, I can have bladder snails in here and not feed them for months at a time, and they will simply live off of the residual algae and biofilm. And they will reproduce off of that. That's kind of the situation. So, I need the tank working, and I need it to be without these pests. That's what I'm going through right now. So, wish me luck, guys.